Let me ask you a direct question. Do you know what you were doing at 7 a.m. on the day you almost lost everything? William didn't know. He was 68 years old, a retired history teacher, the kind of man who never missed a doctor's appointment in his life. On that winter morning, he did exactly what he had been doing for 40 years. He woke up, got out of bed, went to the bathroom, and prepared coffee. Nothing different, nothing suspicious. Less than 2 hours later, his eldest son was receiving a call from the hospital with news that no son should receive on an ordinary weekday. What happened to William was not a fatality. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't the weak heart that the family had never suspected. It was a sequence of morning habits that he repeated every morning, thinking they were completely normal, and which, for a 68-year-old heart, represented a silent storm about to explode. What you are going to discover in this video will make you look at your morning tomorrow with completely different eyes. There is a specific period of the day between the moment you open your eyes and the first 2 hours after when the human heart is at its point of greatest vulnerability. This is not an opinion, it is documented physiology. It is the moment when cortisol spikes, blood pressure rises, the blood is thicker after hours without hydration, and the nervous system makes a brutal transition from rest to a state of alert. For a young heart, the body compensates for all of this automatically. For a heart that has already worked for 6, 7, 8 decades, any extra push at this moment can be the final push. And the 5 errors we are going to reveal here are exactly those pushes that millions of people give their own hearts every morning without having the slightest awareness of what they are doing. What makes this subject so urgent and so serious is that none of the 5 errors we are going to talk about seem dangerous. On the contrary, most seem healthy, disciplined, even exemplary. They are habits you probably learned from someone you respect, saw on a wellness channel, or heard on a health podcast. And that is exactly why they are so dangerous. Because no one questions what seems obvious. No one stops to think if getting up with energy, having a strong coffee, or taking a cold shower really is what they say it is for a body over 60. In this video, you are going to have the conversation that no one has had with you yet, with real data, with physiology explained in a way that anyone can understand, and with a simple 5-minute protocol that can completely change how your heart faces every morning from now on. If you are over 60 years old or take care of someone who is, this video is not entertainment. It is information that can literally save a life. Before we continue, leave a like now. This helps this content reach those who need it most. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment below where you are watching from and how old you are. I want to truly get to know you because this channel exists for you. Now stay with me until the end because the first error on our list is committed by 95% of people over 60 every morning. And most will hear this for the first time here. It seems impossible, right? Getting out of bed, killing someone? It is such an automatic movement, so commonplace, so absolutely normal, that it doesn't even enter the category of habit. It's just what you do when the alarm rings. You open your eyes, hear the sound, and get up. Perhaps even with that energy of someone who wants to start the day well, who doesn't want to waste time lying down when there are things to do. It looks like discipline. It looks like disposition. For a 30-year-old heart, it might even be. For a heart over 60, this 3-second movement can trigger a cascade of physical reactions that medicine has a specific name to describe, and which figures among the leading causes of fatal falls, dangerous arrhythmias, and morning cardiovascular emergencies in older adults. The name is orthostatic hypotension, and it acts fast, in silence, without warning far enough in advance for you to do anything about it. To understand what happens in your body when you get up abruptly, you need to imagine the following. During the 7 or 8 hours you spent lying down, the blood was distributed relatively uniformly throughout the entire body. Your heart worked at a calm pace, your pressure was low, your nervous system rested. It is a state of balance that the body takes hours to build during sleep, and which you undo in 3 seconds when you jump out of bed. The instant you stand up abruptly, gravity immediately pulls up to a liter of blood into the veins of the legs and abdomen. Suddenly, much less blood reaches the heart to be pumped to the brain. In young people, pressure sensors called baroreceptors detect this drop instantaneously and order the heart to speed up and the vessels to contract to compensate, all in fractions of a second, without you noticing anything. But with age, these sensors become slower, less precise, less quick to react. And during the critical seconds, while the system has not yet reacted, the pressure drops and the brain is left without adequate oxygen. The symptoms of this sudden pressure drop are what many people have already felt and never took seriously because they pass quickly. That dizziness that appears when you get up fast, that darkening of vision for a few seconds, that feeling that the floor shook. Most people attribute it to tiredness, the usual low pressure or lack of coffee, and they move on without a second thought. But what happens beneath these symptoms is much more serious than a passing dizziness. First, the risk of falling is real and immediate, and falls in people over 60 are one of the main causes of hospitalization and death, with hip fractures and head traumas that trigger cascading complications. Second, when the nervous system finally perceives the emergency and reacts, it reacts with force, causing a sharp and violent reflex heart acceleration in a heart that was already under morning hormonal stress. This combination of a pressure drop followed by abrupt heart acceleration can be the trigger for fatal arrhythmias in vulnerable hearts. What makes this error even more insidious is that it doesn't hurt the first time, nor the 10th, nor perhaps the 100th. The body compensates, the moment passes, life goes on. And this creates a false sense that everything is fine, that little dizziness is normal, that it has always been like that it's nothing. But every time this happens, especially in an organism over 60 with less elastic arteries and a less agile autonomic nervous system, you are betting on a roulette where most of the time nothing happens. But when it does, it really happens. William got up abruptly every morning for 40 years. For the first 39 years and 11 months, nothing. On the morning when his heart was already too overwhelmed by the morning hormonal storm, by the night's dehydration, and by another error we will reveal soon, that 3-second movement was the fuse. The body simply had no more reserve to absorb one more shock. The solution is simple, concrete, and easy to apply starting tomorrow morning. When the alarm rings, don't get up. Stay lying down for at least 30 to 60 seconds. Take a deep breath, 4 seconds inhaling through the nose, 4 holding, 6 exhaling through the mouth, and repeat this cycle 5 times. This simple breathing protocol signals to the nervous system that there is no emergency, moderates the release of cortisol and adrenaline, and gives the heart a gentle transition instead of a shock. Then, sit slowly on the edge of the bed with your feet on the floor and stay in that position for another 60 seconds, making gentle circles with your ankles. This movement activates the calf muscle pumps that push blood back to the heart against gravity. Only then get up, slowly, and stand still for a few seconds to ensure there is no dizziness. 2 to 3 minutes in total. It's the time of a television commercial, and it can be the difference between a safe morning and an emergency that no one saw coming. The next error is even more common than this one, and it has to do with something you probably ignore every morning thinking it makes no difference at all. Think about what you do right after you open your eyes in the morning. You go to the bathroom, you grab your phone, you prepare coffee, maybe you check messages, turn on the television, start mentally organizing the day ahead. What you almost certainly do not do, and which should be the absolute first thing before anything else, is drink water. And this apparently harmless oversight, this omission that seems to have no consequence, is putting your heart in a situation of real risk every morning while you follow your routine, completely oblivious to what is happening inside your blood vessels. During the 7 or 8 hours you spent sleeping, your body did not stop. The lungs continued exhaling water vapor. The skin perspired to regulate temperature. The kidneys continued filtering blood and producing urine. All this vital work happened without you replenishing the system with a single drop of liquid. The result is that when you wake up, your blood is in a condition that medicine calls hemoconcentration. The volume of liquid in the blood drops drastically, while the number of blood cells remains the same. The blood becomes literally thicker, more viscous, harder to circulate. Imagine trying to pump honey through thin straws. It is exactly this overload that you impose on the heart every morning when you ignore immediate hydration, at a moment when it is already facing the hormonal storm of waking up. Thick blood is not just hard to pump, it is dramatically more prone to forming fatal clots. When viscosity increases, platelets and red cells stick closer together, making it much easier for thrombi to form that can completely block coronary arteries. In fluid and well-hydrated blood, small damages to the arterial walls are repaired naturally without major consequences. But in thick blood, platelets accumulate excessively at the point of injury, forming clots that grow until they obstruct the flow completely. This is literally the mechanism of an acute myocardial infarction, and it is no coincidence that most heart attacks happen in the early hours of the morning, exactly when the blood is in its most viscous state after an entire night without hydration. What makes this error so dangerous is that it doesn't act alone. It potentiates all the other morning errors. When you are already with thick blood from nocturnal dehydration, and then you get up abruptly, drink strong coffee on an empty stomach, or expose yourself to any other cardiovascular stress, you are stacking risk factors on a heart that is already working with reduced capacity. It's like driving with bald tires on a wet track on a steep descent. Each factor alone would already be worrying, but the combination creates conditions for a catastrophe that can happen at any moment. And the worst part? None of this appears in any clear symptom before it is too late. Thick blood doesn't hurt. Hemoconcentration doesn't warn you. You feel completely normal while the risk accumulates silently inside your vessels. The solution is so simple, it will seem impossible that it makes such a difference. But it does. Before going to sleep every night, leave a large glass of water at room temperature on your nightstand. When you wake up, before anything else, before the phone, before the bathroom, before the coffee, drink at least 300 milliliters of water, slowly and without rushing. This water immediately begins to reverse the hemoconcentration, makes the blood more fluid, and removes a huge burden from the work the heart needs to do to circulate blood through the arteries. In a matter of minutes, you are literally diluting the danger and creating much safer cardiovascular conditions to face the rest of the morning. 30 seconds, a glass of water, a habit that costs zero and can be the difference between a normal morning and an emergency that no one expected. The next error on the list is a favorite for most people to start the day, and it is one of the most treacherous of all, because it comes disguised as pleasure and energy. If there is a habit that people defend with a passion disproportionate to the size of the cup, it is morning coffee. We are not talking about a light, diluted coffee taken calmly after a meal. We are talking about that strong, concentrated espresso taken in one gulp while still in pajamas with a completely empty stomach. The ritual that millions of people over 60 repeat every morning as if it were a vested right, a biological necessity, something that cannot be questioned. And it is exactly this conviction that makes this habit so dangerous. Because no one questions what they feel as a necessity. No one stops to think about what is happening inside the heart and arteries the moment that first strong cup goes down the esophagus and the caffeine enters the bloodstream. In an organism that hasn't eaten anything yet, that is still dehydrated from the night, that is still at the peak of cortisol and adrenaline from waking up. For a young and elastic heart, the body absorbs this shock without major consequences. For a heart that has already worked for decades, this combination is an overlap of stimuli that can push the cardiovascular system beyond its safety limit. The mechanism by which coffee on an empty stomach becomes dangerous for people over 60 involves a cascade of effects that amplify each other in a potentially lethal way. When you consume caffeine on an empty stomach, absorption is dramatically accelerated. Instead of being released gradually into the bloodstream over 30 to 60 minutes, as would happen with food in the stomach, caffeine reaches its blood peak in just 15 to 20 minutes, creating a caffeine shock that bombards the cardiovascular system with intense stimuli almost instantaneously. This sudden peak blocks adenosine receptors in the brain, which is the substance that normally promotes relaxation, and at the same time triggers the massive release of adrenaline and noradrenaline, activating the sympathetic nervous system that was already hyperactive because of awakening. The result is an overlap of stimuli that can raise blood pressure by 20 to 40 points in a matter of minutes, accelerate the heart to dangerous levels, and create a state of cardiovascular hyperexcitability, where any additional stress can trigger catastrophic events. For people with silent coronary disease or undiagnosed hypertension, conditions extremely common after 60, often without perceptible symptoms, this morning overload can literally be the last straw that causes the rupture of an arterial plaque, a ventricular arrhythmia, or a hypertensive crisis that requires emergency intervention. There is also an aspect of this era that most people never consider, and that greatly aggravates the already worrying scenario. Caffeine on an empty stomach stimulates the release of glucose stored in the liver through the activation of stress hormones. But without food in the stomach to provide metabolic stability, this results in sharp peaks and drops in blood sugar that force the pancreas to work at an accelerated pace and create hormonal fluctuations that further stress the heart. At the same time, coffee on an empty stomach increases the production of gastric acid to levels that can cause severe irritation, reflux, and even ulcers in susceptible people. And there is a direct and documented connection between digestive problems and cardiac arrhythmias through the vagus nerve, which connects the stomach directly to the heart. When the stomach is irritated by caffeine and excess acid, it can send erratic signals through the vagus nerve that disturb the natural heart rhythm, especially in older people whose autonomic nervous system is already less stable and less capable of absorbing these interferences without reacting in an exaggerated and potentially dangerous way. What makes the situation even more critical is the tolerance and dependence that develop over the years. People over 60 who have been drinking strong coffee every morning for decades frequently need larger and larger doses to feel the same stimulating effect, creating a dangerous escalation that can lead to the consumption of 400, 500, even 600 milligrams of caffeine in the early hours of the day without realizing they are approaching toxic levels. Palpitations, tremors, anxiety, and difficulty breathing, symptoms that can be clear signs that the cardiovascular system is being pushed beyond its safety limits, are routinely dismissed as normal morning nervousness or everyday stress. And for those taking medication for blood pressure, heart, or other common chronic conditions over 60, the risk multiplies. Caffeine can interact in dangerous and unpredictable ways with these medications, amplifying effects, reducing efficacy, or creating combinations that overload the heart in ways that even their own doctor may not have warned them about because the patient never mentioned the habit during the consultation. The change necessary to eliminate this risk doesn't need to be dramatic or painful. It needs to be intelligent and gradual. The first step is simple. Never drink coffee with a completely empty stomach. Before the first cup, consume something, a banana, a handful of nuts, a slice of bread, to slow down the caffeine absorption and reduce the sudden peak that overloads the heart. Second, drink at least 300 to 500 milliliters of water before even thinking about coffee, ensuring that the blood is already more fluid and the cardiovascular system is not operating in the state of maximum vulnerability from nocturnal dehydration. Third, gradually reduce the concentration and quantity. Swap the triple espresso for a more diluted version and limit yourself to a small cup in the first few hours after waking up. And if you are over 60 and take heart or blood pressure medication, talk to your doctor specifically about how morning coffee may be interacting with your treatment in ways you are unaware of, and that may be creating hidden cardiovascular risks every morning. The next error will surprise many people because it looks exactly like the opposite of a problem. It looks like health. It looks like discipline. It looks like the habit every doctor recommends. And for a heart over 60 at the wrong time, it can be one of the most dangerous triggers on this entire list. This is the hardest error to accept on the entire list because it goes against everything you've ever heard about health, discipline, and longevity. Exercise is life. Movement is medicine. Those who exercise live longer. That is an indisputable scientific fact. But there is a variable that almost never appears in this conversation, and that for people over 60 can be the difference between exercise being protective or being the trigger for a cardiovascular catastrophe: the timing. Doing intense exercise in the first hours after waking up, getting out of bed and going straight for a heavy run, an intense weightlifting session, or any activity that spikes the heart rate abruptly, places a heart already overloaded by the morning hormonal storm in a situation of extreme demand that it simply may not be able to meet safely. And cases of sudden death in gyms and during morning runs that appear in the news with disturbing regularity happen largely for exactly this reason. People who stacked multiple risk factors in a moment of maximum cardiovascular vulnerability without having the slightest awareness of what they were doing. To understand why exercise timing matters so much, you need to understand what is already happening to your heart in the early morning hours before you even put on your sneakers. Cortisol is at its peak, speeding up the heart and constricting blood vessels. Adrenaline was released to make the transition from sleep to wakefulness, elevating pressure and heart rate. The blood is thicker from nocturnal dehydration, forcing the heart to work harder to circulate the same volume. Blood pressure is naturally higher due to morning circadian rhythms, adding more resistance to cardiac work. Now take all of that already existing, already real overload, already stressing the heart before you do anything, and add intense exercise on top. The heart, which was already working in conditions of high stress, suddenly needs to pump much more blood to the active muscles, triggering oxygen demand to levels that may be impossible to supply adequately. It is literally throwing gasoline on a fire that was already burning brightly. The scenario becomes even more dangerous when we consider what intense morning exercise does to cholesterol plaques in the coronary arteries, a fact that rarely appears in conversations about cardiovascular health and that may be the most important of all for those over 60. Many people in this age group have some degree of asymptomatic coronary disease, plaques in the arteries that do not cause any symptoms during normal daily activities, but become a serious problem when the heart is forced to work at its limit. During intense exercise, the heart dramatically increases its demand for oxygen. If the coronary arteries have plaques that reduce the space available for blood flow, this extra demand simply cannot be met, creating severe ischemia that can destabilize the heart's electrical system and trigger fatal arrhythmias. Worse yet, the combination of elevated morning blood pressure with intense physical effort can create enough mechanical force to rupture an unstable plaque, triggering an acute heart attack in a person who didn't know they had any problem and who was exercising exactly to take care of their health. There is also an additional factor that multiplies the risk and is present in the routine of most people who exercise early: exercising while fasting and dehydrated. When the body needs energy to sustain intense effort without carbohydrates available in the stomach, it resorts to emergency reserves, breaking down muscle for energy, releasing additional stress hormones, and potentially causing hypoglycemia that imposes yet another load on an already overloaded cardiovascular system. Combined with the thick blood of nocturnal dehydration, the heart finds itself in a situation where it needs to work at maximum intensity while the fuel is inadequate and the means of transport, the blood, is having difficulty flowing. Many cases of collapse during morning runs happen with people who seemed perfectly healthy, well-conditioned, without any diagnosis of heart problems, because the problem was not in the heart at rest. It was in the explosive combination of factors that only manifests when everything happens together at the wrong time without anyone having warned that it was dangerous. The good news, and it is important that you hear this clearly, is that the solution is not to stop exercising. It is to reorganize the timing and intensity with intelligence. If you want to exercise in the morning, wait at least 2 to 3 hours after waking up to allow the body to balance itself naturally, for awakening hormones to normalize, for hydration to be replenished, and for blood pressure to stabilize. Drink water before any activity. Eat something light before exercising. Always start with a very gradual and prolonged warm-up before any intense effort. And if you are over 60 and prefer higher intensity exercises, seriously consider moving your session to mid-morning, afternoon, or early evening, when the cardiovascular system is in a much more stable state and prepared to respond to demands without the accumulated risk of the morning danger zone. Exercise is one of the greatest gifts you can give your heart, provided you offer it at the right time. And now we come to the fifth and most dangerous error of the entire list, the one that almost cost the life of the person who inspired this video, the one that wellness influencers continue to promote as the secret to longevity, in which, for a heart over 60, can be the most violent and unpredictable trigger of this entire list. This is the error that is most frightening when you understand what really happens inside the body, because it is promoted with such conviction, with so many viral videos, with so many enthusiastic testimonials from people who swear it changed their lives, that questioning it seems almost like heresy. Cold showers, ice plunges, morning thermal shock, the holy grail of modern biohacking, promoted by health influencers with millions of followers as if it were the ultimate secret to energy, immunity, and longevity. More disposition, better mood, strengthened immune system, accelerated metabolism. The promises are irresistible. And for a 25-year-old athlete with elastic arteries and a heart at full capacity, part of these benefits may even be real. But for a person over 60, with decades of accumulated cardiovascular wear, with arteries that have naturally lost elasticity over time, and a less agile autonomic nervous system to react to extreme stimuli, morning thermal shock can be the most violent and unpredictable trigger of this entire list. And the problem is that no one in biohacking videos makes this distinction. No one puts up a warning saying that what works for a 25-year-old body can kill a 65-year-old body. What happens inside your organism at the moment the cold water touches your skin is a total and immediate emergency reaction that the body interprets as a direct aggression to survival. In fractions of a second, what medicine calls massive peripheral vasoconstriction occurs. Thousands of small blood vessels in the skin and extremities close simultaneously, like floodgates being violently locked to preserve the vital heat of central organs. Imagine your cardiovascular system as a network of pipes where suddenly thousands of the smaller pipes are closed at the same time. The pressure in the main circuit explodes instantly. Studies document that thermal shock can raise systolic pressure by 20 to 40 points in a matter of seconds. For people with already elevated pressure or a compromised cardiovascular system, these numbers can be even more extreme and potentially lethal, because the arteries that would need to absorb this pressure increase no longer have the elasticity they had decades ago. And the combination of arterial stiffness with a sudden and violent pressure spike creates a real risk of unstable plaque rupture in the coronaries or a hemorrhagic stroke. What makes thermal shock especially lethal is not just the pressure spike, it is what happens simultaneously to the heart while that pressure explodes. To pump blood through thousands of suddenly constricted vessels, the heart needs to beat with much more force and frequency, triggering its oxygen demand to levels that may be impossible to supply, especially if there is some silent coronary disease present, an extremely common condition in people over 60 that frequently presents no symptoms during normal activities. When the heart is forced into this extreme oxygen demand at a moment when the coronary arteries may be partially obstructed by asymptomatic plaques, the result can be severe ischemia that completely destabilizes the heart's electrical system, opening the way for the most dangerous arrhythmia of all, ventricular fibrillation, where the heart stops pumping blood in a coordinated way and begins to shake chaotically without being able to move blood to the brain or the rest of the body. This is cardiac arrest, and without a defibrillator available within minutes, it is fatal. The most disturbing aspect of this error is what it does to the psychology of those who practice it. Biohacking culture has created a mentality where enduring extreme discomfort is seen as a virtue, as a sign of mental strength, discipline, and commitment to health. People who feel palpitations, dizziness, or chest tightness during a cold shower interpret these signs as the body adapting, as proof that the method is working, as a mental obstacle to be overcome. When in reality, these symptoms can be urgent warnings that the cardiovascular system is being pushed beyond its safety limits. This silencing of the body's own warning signs, trained by a culture that glorifies the extreme and pathologizes comfort, is what transforms a risky habit into a tragedy foretold. The body warns you. It always warns you. The problem is when we learn not to listen. The solution is not to give up all the benefits of cold exposure. It is to implement them gradually, intelligently, and never in the first hours of the morning when the heart is already under maximum pressure. If you are over 60 and want to experience the documented benefits of cold exposure, start with lukewarm water and reduce the temperature very slowly over weeks. Always direct the cold water first to the extremities, feet, and hands before any exposure to the torso. Never start with cold jets directly on the chest. Never perform thermal shock in the first 2 hours after waking up, when the cardiovascular system is already overloaded by the morning danger zone. And if you feel any symptoms, palpitations, dizziness, chest pain, shortness of breath, stop immediately and seek medical evaluation. Now that you know the 5 errors that put the heart at risk every morning, the most important moment of this video has arrived: the morning protection protocol that will show you exactly what to do in the first 5 minutes of the day so that your heart faces every morning with safety, balance, and many more years of life ahead. Now that you know what not to do, the most important part of this video has arrived: what to do. The morning protection protocol is simple, practical, and fits into 5 minutes. It requires no equipment, costs nothing, and does not change your routine radically. It requires only awareness. The awareness that the first minutes after you open your eyes are the most critical for your heart and deserve to be treated with the respect that an organ that has worked for decades deserves to receive. Before closing, I need to be completely transparent with you because your safety is worth more than any view. Everything presented in this video is based on scientific evidence and general clinical experience, but it does not replace a personalized medical evaluation that considers your specific history, your health conditions, your medications, and your individual circumstances. If you have diagnosed heart conditions, hypertension, diabetes, a history of arrhythmias, or any other chronic condition, talk to your doctor before making any significant changes to your morning routine. If you take medication regularly, especially for the heart or blood pressure, some of these habit changes may interact with your treatment in ways that need to be evaluated by a professional who knows your case. The goal of this video is education and awareness, not prescription. Use this information as a starting point for a more informed conversation with the health professionals who take care of you. If you have made it this far, I want you to stop for a moment and recognize something important. You have just invested time in a conversation about the organ that has worked non-stop for decades inside your chest, without vacation, without rest, without complaining, and which deserves to receive back at least 5 minutes of conscious care every morning. In an age where human attention is contested every second by content that adds nothing, you chose to stay. You chose to learn. You chose to care about what is happening inside your own body. And that choice, as small as it may seem, may be the most important one you have made in a long time. Think about what we have covered together in this video. We discovered that there is a real and documented morning danger zone where cardiovascular risk spikes 40% in the first hours of the day. We understood why getting up abruptly can trigger fatal falls and dangerous arrhythmias. We saw how nocturnal dehydration turns the blood into a thick substance prone to clots that overloads the heart even before you do anything. We discovered why strong coffee on an empty stomach is a cardiovascular bomb disguised as an innocent ritual. We understood that intense exercise at the wrong time can be more dangerous than not exercising. And we learned that the cold shower, promoted as a secret to longevity, can be, for a heart over 60, the most violent trigger of all. 5 errors, 5 truths that no one told you until today. What I ask you to do now is concrete and simple. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings, don't jump out of bed. Breathe. Drink the water you are going to leave on your nightstand tonight. Sit on the edge of the bed for a minute. Get up slowly. 5 minutes. Just that. You don't need to change everything at once. Lasting changes happen one at a time, with awareness and consistency. Start with these 5 minutes tomorrow and feel the difference that a heart treated with respect makes in the rest of the day. More energy, more clarity, more safety. The feeling that you are taking care of what matters most, your health and your life. And if this video added something real to you, if it changed how you are going to face tomorrow morning, if it made you think of someone you love who needs to hear this, then I have a simple request in exchange. Subscribe to the channel now. Every video we publish here was created with the same commitment to your health and your quality of life. Leave a like. This simple gesture helps this content reach people who are at risk right now without knowing it. And share it with someone you love, a family member, a friend, someone over 60 who practices these habits every morning thinking they are taking care of their own health. This information does not reach those who need it on its own. It arrives when someone who has already received it decides to pass it on. That someone can be you. Thank you for being here. Take care of your heart with the same dedication it takes care of you. For decades, without stopping, every day.